In today's lesson, we're going to deal with passive with two objects. So far, we have said that when we transform an active sentence into a passive sentence, we need to identify subject, verb, object, and then do the change. The subject becomes the agent and the object of the active becomes the subject of the passive. But in an example like the one that we're going to see today, we find two objects. Joe gave me some flowers. So we identify Joe is the person who did the action. Joe is the subject. Then we have the verb to give, in this case is past simple, gave. And then we have me and some flowers, and both of them are objects, but two different objects. One, some flowers, is the direct object. It answers the question what. What did Joe give me? He gave me some flowers. So this is the direct object. Whereas the question to whom did Joe give the flowers? To me. So me is the indirect object. Indirect. Okay. So as we have two objects, we're going to have two possibilities when we transform these into a passive sentence. We have the possibility, number one, to start with the indirect object, or the possibility, number two, to start with the direct object. Good. So let's start with the indirect object. Good. Direct, indirect, and direct object. So the first thing that we have to check is that if we start with the indirect object, this object, which is me, the object me, yes, the object pronoun me, is transformed into a subject pronoun, which in this case is I. I. Good. Imagine that you have Joe gave him or get her, for example, him or her, some flowers. So we're going to see that these, okay, we have it. Good. So these objects, this pronoun referring to the indirect objects, when they are transformed into a passive structure, they are the subject of the passive structure. So as we see, me is transformed into I, yes, Alessia, and then we will see how the different possibilities would be. So for example, I, and now what tense is gave? What tense is gave? So we know that gave is the second column of the irregular verbs. So we know this is past simple. Remember, when we have to transform from active to passive, we think, what is the past simple, the verb to be? Because passive, remember, be plus past participle. So, I was. And remember, as we only have one word in the active, we need two in the passive. Good. So, I was plus the past participle given some flowers. As we have two words in the passive, remember the first one is the verb to be in past simple and the second one is the past participle. That is the third column in the regular verb list. Okay, so the final results, this passive structure with the indirect object as the subject would be I was given some flowers. So as we saw, we need to change from me to I. Imagine he says Joe gave you the flowers. You in this case would be you as a subject, it wouldn't change. So you is you. Imagine Joe gave him some flowers. Him would be he. John gave her some flowers. That would be she was given some flowers. John gave it some flowers. It wouldn't change, it's it. Joe gave us some flowers. Us would be we. We were given flowers. The same as you, yes, in the plural, yes, this wouldn't change. And finally, Joe gave them some flowers would be they were given some flowers. So depending on the subject pronoun, remember that we have to change the verb to be. Yes, I was, you were, he was, they were, etc. Plus past participle. Okay, so this was the first possibility. I have to say that when we use indirect objects as in the passive structure as the subject, it's more natural. It sounds more natural in English, is what normally we say. For example, the students were given the exams, yes, or we were given the instructions on the plane, yes, something, and we put the person, and it was given to the person. But also, we might find the possibility of using the direct objects, yes, as and the possibility for a passive structure. Look, direct objects here, some flowers, and now, as before, we need two words because in the active we only have one word, gave, which is past simple. So, what is the verb to be with some flowers? Some flowers could be substituted by they. Yeah, so some flowers were given. And now, instead of just some flowers were given, yes, if we want to say to whom, yes, we need the preposition to. Yes, so we would say some flowers were given to me. Some flowers were given to me. So in this case, when we write the indirect object at the end, we need to add the preposition to. I hope this video is useful to transform active with two objects into passive with two objects as well, indirect and direct objects.